Hello again, and welcome back to Educator.com's Introduction to PHP course. In today's lesson, we're going to be wrapping up our discussion of conditional loops. First off, we're going to be talking about nested conditional loops. Just as we have talked about nested conditional control structures, you can do that with loops as well. We're going to revisit the break and continue statement as they relate to nested conditional loops. Because they're a little bit different application when loops are nested. And then we're also going to go over some loop debugging tips because loops can sometimes be tricky to get them to work right. So first of all, any conditional loop can be nested within another conditional loop, just as was the case with our conditional control structures like if. One of the common uses for nesting conditional loops is to loop over multi-dimensional arrays. Because that allows you to, the outer loop you'll iterate over one dimension of the array, and then in this inner loop you'll iterate over the second dimension of the array. So let's actually take a loop at that in an example. This is a file called nestedloops.php, and we've created an array here called matrix. So it's a multi-dimensional array. It's supposed to sort of represent a 3x3 matrix, and it's a the outer array is a numerically indexed array that contains 3 arrays, each of which is a numerically indexed array that contains 3 elements, which are just the strings for like the first row, or the first array represent the first row of the matrix, 1A, 1B, 1C, 2A, 2B, 2C for the second row, and so forth. And all we're going to do is to practice with the nested loops is to iterate over this array and output each row. So the way we do that is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to iterate over the outer array, which is going to be matrix itself. And we're not using a for each loop here, even though we're iterating over an array, because I want to talk a little bit about using counter variables in nested loops. And I'll get to that in a second. But basically, this for each loop right here loops over the outer matrix, the outer array, which is the matrix variable, and once it iterates each time on the matrix array, we're going to set a variable called row equal to whatever value that we're on as we iterate through the array. So the first time through row is going to equal this array here. The second time through it's going to equal the second array, and so forth. And the way we access that is by using the counter variable to get access into this indexed array. Then what we're going to do is using a while loop, and this is to show how you can nest different loops within other loops, we're going to loop over the row array, because each element of matrix is an array itself, and we're going to loop over each row array and just basically output each of its different values. So what this does is this we set up a counter 0, and this is our test condition to make sure that we're only looping over, not looping past the end of the array. We increment the loop counter at the end of each while loop, and then basically the content of the loop is that we're just going to output each row value followed by a space. Now the reason I said that here we're also iterating over arrays, so typically you'd use a for each statement for that. The reason is just to show that you'll often see, especially when iterating over multi-dimensional arrays, several levels of nested loops. And it's common in the outer array, where you actually have a purpose for using the counters and wouldn't be using a for each loop, that the outer array, and this is kind of a convention that's used, the counter is called I, and then for the next for the next loop nested within that one, the counter is called J. And then if you have a third one, it's called K, and so it's I, J, and K, and that's a common convention. So I just wanted to explain it to you, so you'll see that a lot, that when you have multiple conditional loops nested within one another that have counters, the common convention is to name them I, J, and K, and you typically don't see more than 3 loops nested together at the same time. So if we go ahead and run this script, nestedloops.php, we can see that what it does is it goes through and it in the outer loop it pulls out each row of the array, or each row of our matrix, and then loops over that array, outputting each of the values in it. So here we can see all of the values in that first array which is the first element of matrix. And then you can see that it's done the same for the second element of matrix and the third element of matrix. And so that's one way that you can use nested loops to loop over a multi-dimensional array.